Well, there's a great line at a legal conference, and they said AI will replace lawyers who don't learn how to use AI. And I think it's incumbent upon every business.
Sharp strategies, sweet success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and you're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. Today, I am here with Jay Berkowitz of 10 Golden Rules. They're an SEO company that I've known for a few years now. I've seen him speak at a few events and talk about SEO and digital marketing in general. Seen him do some pretty cool stuff with AI at some of these events. And sent an invitation, had him come here on the podcast, and today we're going to talk about whatever comes up, but probably SEO, probably AI, probably digital marketing, which is kind of a theme in a lot of podcasts these days. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jay and let him kind of fill in the gaps and where you can learn more about him and find out more about him.
Awesome, Tiffany. Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here. And I'm a fan of the podcast, so it's fun to be on. My company's called 10 Golden Rules, and people always want to know the origin story. I worked in big marketing for McDonald's and Coca-Cola as a director of marketing. And then I went to a small startup called eDiets, an online diet store. After selling Big Macs, I started selling diets. And we grew the company to $60 million in revenue. And I had a tremendous opportunity in the early 2002, 2003. We had 100,000 people a day clicking on our banners on MSN, AOL, and Yahoo and coming to our website. So in the very early days, I got to find out, what do people click on? What gets clicks? What gets conversions? We tried different sales funnels and A/B testing and built an email list in 2002. So I was very lucky to get so much. It was like my own personal test lab, because every week we ran an A/B test and really got to learn what works in online marketing. And then I wrote this book and presentation called The 10 Golden Rules of Online Marketing. And so I've been stuck with that funny company name for 23 years, but it worked, so I stuck with it.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way about Sharp Cookies sometimes because it was one of the things where I was walking around the house, like doing housework, trying to think of a name for an LLC because I was doing freelance work at the time. And it was just like, Sharp Cookie, that's good, that's good. And then I
Yeah.
registered with and just stuck with it. And sometimes I grapple with that. It's like, oh, it's kind of a funny company name, but also it works. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
stick with
Well, but
it.
hey, you want to hire a sharp cookie? I like it.
Yeah, I know, and that is entirely incidental. It wasn't like I planned that out, that whole thing, but now I use it. It's and like my mastermind members are called Sharp Cookies, so somehow these things work out. I'm a little bit jealous though that you got to do a lot of digital marketing in the early days of digital marketing because a lot of things were easier back then. I mean, not easier and like less challenging, but there were a lot fewer roadblocks, I guess I would say, between you and the end user. And it feels like the data you could get was like actually first party data. I mean, it feels like a lot of that has changed, right?
Yeah, I want to think it was easier, but in a lot of ways it was hard. Like, you had to build a website. It was like tens of thousands of dollars. It was like you had to build a website. There was no free website builders and no software and no, um, you know, MailChimp and so many things we take for granted today. A lot of that you had to do by hand, and it was expensive. So on one hand, it was easier. There was certainly much less competition. And once SEO became a thing, it was really easy in the early days. Like we had a little I called it a parlor trick, like a little card trick. We used to send a PR web press release. That was the first thing we would do for every new client. And this worked like a charm. And I figured, well, so long as it works, I'll keep doing it for 6 months. So we'd put, like if it was a personal injury firm, such and such a firm, personal injury law firm in Virginia wins big case. And like you didn't even need anything more than something that sounded like a press release. And we'd put the keyword in the headline, the subheadline, and in the body of the text, and at the bottom in the About Us section. And we'd target three keywords, and two of the three would go to the first page of Google with one press release. SEO was easy, you know. And I thought that little, I call it, again, parlor trick, I thought that would only work for like 6 months. Worked for like 6 years. And then Google finally caught up with it and started, and competition caught up with it. So a lot of people had registered, had SEO optimized personal injury law firm Virginia. And so you had tons of competition. You couldn't just do one press release to rank for a keyword. But it was fun while it lasted.
And somebody reminded me the other day of the old days of SEO where you could make pages of all white text with all the keywords that you wanted. They were asking me about it, and I was like, I mean, I've been in the game a while, but that was even before my time. But I mean, in the early days of Google, like when it was just the basic search engine, like keywords and backlinks, and initially it was keywords, and then it became more backlinks were pretty much the ways to like game the algorithm. And these days it's a lot more complicated and nuanced to the point where sometimes I'm talking to people and they think everything is related to SEO. It's like, should we do this? Will it hurt our SEO? And it's like, no, it's not even, connected. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of related to what I was just saying a little bit, but what do you think today people are maybe emphasizing too much when they're going into SEO? Like where do people like spend all of their, like your business owners, your clients, where are they spending their mental energy on SEO that maybe they shouldn't?
Well, I think the one area would be focus too much on the SEO and not enough on the maps. Because Google Maps SEO is its own practice, it's its own algorithm, and the maps come up higher on the page than the SEO that's down below the page. So first and foremost, you have to have a Google Maps SEO practice, which is, local links, local content, Google reviews, something called NAP, name, address, and phone. So making sure you have very precise consistency in all the listings of your firm name, your address, and your phone number everywhere on the internet. And what happens a lot of times, one site will have your name wrong, and you'll go and change a bunch of the smaller sites, and then Google defaults back and they default back to the wrong listing. So you've got to get to the root cause of the problem and make sure you're listed precisely and consistently throughout the internet for the Google Maps listings. And reviews, first and foremost, very important. And not necessarily the number of reviews, but we've found that a cadence of 1 to 2 new reviews per week per location is definitely key for the local service ads, the Google screen, but also the Maps algorithm. So, I would say not focusing on the maps would be a failure in SEO. And then the next biggest thing you mentioned right off the top is AI, but it's the AI overviews and the people also ask. So those two sections are a new form of SEO. And I call it, answering questions optimization. And the reason for that is multiple reasons. One is we all search differently. So we don't just search, I'll use the earlier example, Virginia personal injury lawyer. We might search like, what do I do if I get hit by an Uber? Who's going to pay for my car repairs? Like we know how to ask questions of Siri, Google Voice, Alexa, and we've relearned that asking a question can get a really good answer. As a matter of fact, now Google will actually type out the answer like a Chat GPT style answer in AI overviews, and some people skip straight to Chat GPT to ask the question. Now the good news, both of them now are showing the websites they use to compile the answer. So there's a whole new branch or category of AI optimization. I said answer questions optimization, where if you come up in the answer, AI overviews, the Google version of ChatGPT and ChatGPT will put a link to your website. So inherently in your SEO, you want to start answering questions, like literally. So we've been actually doing it for years on video. We've been answering questions. And like I said before, what do I do if I get hit by an Uber? And the attorney will start out, one of the questions I get asked all the time, what do I do if I get hit by an Uber? Who's going to pay for my medical and my car repairs? And then he'll go on to answer that question. And so we've been optimizing for question and answer for 3 or 4 years now, and they're starting to show up all the time in the AI overviews results, in the Chat GPTs, and in the people also ask section of Google where they show 3 or 4 similar answers to a question. So I would say that's a new form of SEO that we should all be working on. And if you have your question of what are they too focused on, this is something that they're not focused on enough, perhaps.
And it's interesting when in terms of large language model optimization, and I'm starting to dabble in this as well, starting to get familiar with the tools that'll monitor your brand on these large language models. I'm still not quite sure how they work, if I'm being honest, or if all of it's just like woo woo, hand wavium type stuff. But one thing I've noticed is that video plays a key role in how you show up in ChatGPT. And like when I asked ChatGPT about myself, one of the main things it references are my podcast and what I've talked about on the podcast, things I've talked about on other people's podcasts. And so it's not, ChatGPT isn't just crawling our website and our text like Google used to, or still does rather, but it's also like ChatGPT is transcribing video content and audio content and using it to populate results. And so, video's always been important to SEO, but now it's like important to SEO and LLMO, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue like SEO does. And it's just interesting. It's interesting how these things evolve and like what's important. And FAQs have been important for a long time. That's what Google has been trying to get us to do is to answer people's questions, or to position our websites to answer people's questions in search.
Yeah, maybe one way to sum it up, and it sounds like you've got it pretty well figured out. There's a thing that an acronym people have been using to describe Google's algorithms lately is EEAT, which is expertise, experience, authority, and trust. And so one of the reasons why I think you're seeing your podcast, and particularly appearing on other people's podcasts, is that makes you an authority, and makes you an expert, right? If you appear on websites talking about a topic, especially if those are respected websites. So getting on podcasts like this is great for all of us because, both Google and ChatGPT, you're putting more weighting on where you appear as an expert in other publications. Like I recently wrote an article for the GLM magazine, and that's great because a bunch of people talked about it in social media, and GLM talked about it and linked to my website and my LinkedIn. And the more people who link to your LinkedIn and your LinkedIn's linked to your website, it builds that network of authority in terms of how ChatGPT and Google analyze your expertise, your authoritativeness, and trust is the final one. And trust comes from, several signals where other websites link to your website.
Yeah, it's funny. I say EEAT a lot, but if I'm ever in a point where it's like I need to spell out what each word means, I always leave off the one E. I'm like expertise, authority, trustworthiness, and it always eludes me. I'm glad you said it.
Experience is,
Yeah.
expertise and experience. They could be EAT.
When I'm talking to my attorney, and all of my clients work with SEO companies, and I'm more or less trying to, a lot of times, acting in the position of like, here's what the SEO company told you, like here's what they asked you to do, and in language you can understand. But the whole thing about EEAT and how to build expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, whatever, is one of the things that fuels it are secondary sources. Just kind of like when you're writing an essay for high school or in college, you had to go get a secondary source for your work. And Google's doing the same thing. It wants to learn more about a topic. It's not going to go to the source material about the topic. It's not going to go to your website. I mean, it will, but it wants to learn about your brand from these secondary sources. And so, like, I'm telling business owners, like, create those secondary sources. Like, we need to be going after those brands where other people can talk about us, because it is really important. It is really important to the whole EEAT profile.
Yeah, it makes sense because when you go back to the roots of Google, there was 10 or 12 search engines before Google, Yahoo and Ask Jeeves, and what differentiated Google was the link profile. And essentially what they said was, every search engine could read the internet, scrape it, And if the words like search engine optimization agency appeared somewhere on your website, they could show your website for that result. But the difference with Google was they would say, okay, how many other websites link to your website? And the website that had the most links in the early days would come up first in the search result when those keywords appeared on a website. And then they started saying, okay, how many important websites? How many relevant websites link to your website? So that's essentially putting quality rankings on secondary sources. And now you're pointing out that if there's an article about you, or you're listed as an expert on a website and referenced, and they reference back to your website, that's positioning you as a secondary source, as an expert with expertise and experience on a topic. And so that's the logic flow to all of this.
And it's difficult to explain to business owners who know their trade but don't know SEO. It's just like, how is talking on somebody's podcast gonna help rank my website? Because it seems like a stretch, but like if you do lay it out the way you just laid it out, it's like there's a logic to it. Google's a librarian and is trying to find more information about you. They're gonna look in these places. And they did that back in the day, and in a lot of ways they're still doing it. They're just more sophisticated about it. Is probably what they'd say.
Yeah, and the algorithm's putting a lot of weight on a podcast as an authoritative point of search, because I've searched a lot of the folks who've been on my podcast, and one of the top 2 or 3 results now is their page on my podcast. So the converse is that being on a podcast is great for your brand.
Oh yeah, it's great for your brand. It's great for a lot of things. And I mean, there's AI podcasts these days. A friend of mine was showing an AI podcast that he made. It was pretty cool. But when with ChatGPT, and when text content is so like easily reproducible, or at least a lot easier than it used to be, videos are still harder. You have to put some effort into them. And so it makes sense. It makes sense why a search engine would maybe pivot away from, purely text and look to video and look to audio to learn more about an individual or learn more about a brand, for sure. Yeah.
I wonder, you're running a mastermind, which is awesome. What are some of the questions that are on the tips of everybody's tongue in the mastermind?
I get a lot of like attorneys and business owners will ask me that, or some variant of that question. And, I think the truth of it is like what we talk about in the mastermind group, we talk about marketing ideas, we talk about how to do stuff, but it's amazing how much of it is mindset and like, interpersonal like management with the business owners or the teams or the vendors. And so, teaching them how to understand and interpret what the vendors are saying to them. That's usually big. How to address roadblocks with team members, how to organize and get everyone on the same page. When we're doing a marketing director mastermind, it's like, I'd say like, the videos, like the meetings that we do are probably a good 70% marketing, but the conversations we have are almost 100% interpersonal and things of that nature. And so that's kind of what's interesting about these groups in general. I don't get hit with as many SEO questions as I used to these days. I get hit with questions about AI and how to incorporate AI into all of this. And that's actually, I spent a good portion of my morning working on that, AI worksheets and process worksheets for the mastermind members. So hopefully it goes over well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about mindset. Before we went solely working with law firms, like 10 Golden Rules, we started 23 years ago. We worked with everybody, and then we had 2 really big niches. And it was law firms and seminars and events. But we decided to go all in with the law firms, mostly because the seminar event guys were lots of fun, but they didn't always pay their bills. So the law firms were business people. They were great to deal with. But I was lucky to work with the Tony Robbins companies and do a bunch of Tony Robbins events. And T. Harv Eker, we did a lot of work with his companies. And a lot of like the Secrets of the Millionaire Mind was T. Harv Eker's signature event. And everybody wanted to go there to learn the secrets of the millionaire mind. And then when they got there, they learned a lot about budgeting and finance and owning your own business. And it's a lot of hard work, the mindset work around how you think and deal with money, right? And it's like exactly what you said is like, everybody wants the secret magic pill to become a millionaire. They don't want to do the hard work with the earning money, saving money, investing money. That the mindset piece is the hard work.
How do you see like what you do and what your company does like change in the next like year or so? It feels like so much has changed in marketing. Like where do you see all this heading like in the next year or 5 years?
Well, there's a great line at a legal conference, and they said AI will replace lawyers who don't learn how to use AI. And I think it's incumbent upon every business. You've got to get great at AI. And we're using AI in almost every facet of our business now. There's no one magic button, AI solution that works for everything. But, everybody's using it for research, but we've got some very sophisticated research techniques. I'll share one with you. We're using it. We have some tremendous tools. The SEO research, there's a company that's really built around AI, does a lot of our keyword research now, does a lot of our competitive analysis, does audits on the websites themselves and gives us feedback on the build of the website, the meta tags and the structure of the website, from an architectural standpoint. But the advanced tip I want to bring you is for Chat GPT searches or even AI overviews, Gemini type of searches. I learned this great strategy, and it's called CRIT, context, role, interview, task. So the first thing you do when you make a search query is you say, give it a context. So I want you to do, I actually used it by submitting 5 candidates that I'm looking at for a position. And I said, the context, I want you to help me make a decision on this person and their fit and how they'll work with me as a person who's going to work directly with me. Your role is you're one of the top experts, business consultants and hiring consultants in the entire world. And you have a lot of expertise with predictive index and DISC. And then I said, I want you to interview me and ask me 2 or 3 questions. And then I uploaded the DISC profile of the individuals, the predictive index profile, and the transcript of my interview that I pulled from AI, an AI tool called Fathom we're using to record all the calls. It gives you a summary of the calls, key takeaways, next steps, and it gives you a complete transcription. So I uploaded the transcription in ChatGPT, and I said, your task is to, compare and contrast these prospects for this role. I uploaded the job description and then how they'll work with me. And it was phenomenal. It gave me a very detailed breakdown on the candidates. It created a chart with 5 or 6 key criteria that it pulled from the job description and ranked each of the 5 candidates, gave me my number 1 candidate, my number 2 candidate, but it had a proviso, like this will be the number 1 candidate if you're looking at a 12-month time cycle, but this person will time out because they only want to come in and fix and move on. This person will be a better long-term fit. So, using the AI and using it with very good prompts, and remember the CRIT, it works for almost anything you want to do, and it's very sophisticated.
I mean, it's incredible the stuff that we're able to do with AI now. And initially, I was pretty skeptical because I'm like, oh, it's a chatbot, because chatbots existed before. But I kind of overlooked the utility of it, which is that you can create specialized agents, characters, whatever you want to call them, give them specialized information, have them carry out like simple things. Something I'm working on, or I hope to be working on soon. This isn't an idea I haven't actually created yet, but we send a lot of email newsletters for our clients. And one of the things that's hard to do consistently is train new people on how to do a really good subject line. And so I started working on an agent that all they do is just evaluate email subject lines. I gave it working on a spreadsheet of really good subject lines and have it set up to where you can send it an email and then it'll reply with a score of the subject line you gave it and an improvement. And just try to make that, part of my team's process when we're setting up email newsletters. So we're working at getting a better open rate. And it's semi-automated, a specialized agent. it does one thing, email subject lines, critically important. And, it's one of the things that, and I mean, what I grapple with though, explaining that, and that sounds really cool, but sometimes I grapple with the idea. It's like, okay, should we train new marketers how to write good subject lines, or can we just make it really easy for them to create new subject lines? There's a little bit of loss, a little bit of gained when you look at the exchange that we're making there.
I love your idea. And what I'm going to do, because I've had my same email provider, it's Weber. It's one of the old school email. It's like a MailChimp, right? And I've had that for over 15 years. I'm going to drop my Weber stats into ChatGPT. All the percentage subject line opens, like clicks, opens and clicks. And then I'm going to ask it to write great subject lines based on how my audience has responded in the past. That's a great idea. Thank you.
I'll tell you the issue I've run into it already though is I can't get my CRM to export subject line, opens, clicks. I think I'm gonna have to have an EA manually go get that. But that was more of a limitation of the program I'm working with specifically. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that, is really cool. And there's a lot of ways that like over time, we're like slowly building AI into the stuff that we do. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's actually a really exciting time to be in marketing in general, in my view. Things are moving a lot faster than they used to, and we had to have copywriters copyright everything. It just took forever.
Another trick, I've been writing articles. I do webinars. Our YouTube channel is great, by the way. If you want to drop deeper into any of these topics, we've had over 1 million views on our 10 Golden Rules YouTube channel. And so I'll take one of my webinars that there's a transcription available on YouTube, or drop it into one of the AI tools and say, write an article about this topic, and I'll give it a CRIT. So the context is, I want a 500-word article on this topic. Your role is you're going to read my article and write it as you're a journalist for, pick the name of the publication, interview me, ask me 3 clarifying questions before you write the article, and your task is to complete this article. It's amazing how high quality, and you can do it in about 15 minutes, and you just edit it, tweak it, personalize it a little bit, maybe include a story, and you're good to go.
Well, it's so much easier to do things like marketing plans and reports. I mean, that's why I love it. I mean, we're just spending a lot less time doing tedious stuff, but we're not teaching marketers how to write good subject lines. So, like I mentioned earlier, the trade-offs will happen. Is there something that you wanted to talk about on this podcast that we didn't get to, or something you wanted to cover a little more in depth?
The thing that I think is the most important for law firms to understand is that there's 3 parts to success for law firm. And so many people are just focused on that first part, which is attracting the leads. And, we're 10 Golden Rules, we're great at attracting the leads, and it's competitive. It's really tough these days. So you've got to be great at SEO. We talked about Google Maps SEO, local service ads, Google Screen, pay-per-click, branding, YouTube, everything. You've got to get it all right. And one big thing in there that people often miss is like, get your brand right, figure out the one thing you stand for and the niche you're going to communicate, and do that consistently. So attracting the leads is part 1, but then you've got to be really great at converting the leads. And we're using some AI software that analyzes the role your intake team plays and giving them feedback. And we've developed a proprietary software that if you miss a phone call, your intake team gets an immediate text. You can call them right back. Or when someone fills out a form on your website, they immediately text your intake team. You can call that person right back. So part 1 is attracting leads, but part 2 is you've got to be great at converting those leads, both with great intake and technology that can support your intake team. And then the final piece, I say, the third part, is 5-star operations. And we're, again, as a marketer, as a digital marketing agency, it's integral to our success. You've got to be, give great service once you sign that customer up, because we rely on the Google reviews and the referrals, and the firm relies on the referrals, because those are the best cases. And the biggest number of cases come from referrals. So you can use different tools like Hona and Case Status to manage your client relationship so that, it's technology. Give your client an app, an AI enabled app that's going to tell them the status of their case, literally case status or HONA, and give them updates, because the number one bar complaint is my lawyer doesn't tell me the status of my case. So really all three parts, attract, convert, and 5-star operations is critical to succeed today, particularly in those tougher, more competitive markets. And everyone I talk to tells me, well, we're in one of the most competitive markets. We've got this big, advertiser, and we've, got a lot of small guys. So you got to nail all three parts to really get it right these days.
Yeah. It is so funny how like you talk to your first attorney, it's like we're in a really competitive marketplace. It's like, okay, noted. And then you hear your 20th say that and you're like, yeah. Anyway. Love the attorneys who listen though, by the way.
Yeah, but half of them have John Morgan and Morgan, so
Oh,
half of them do have a big, huge new competitor in their market, but everybody's got a couple big whales like that in their state.
so if anyone wanted to learn more about you, where should they go to look you up?
10 Golden Rules, spelled TEN, 10goldenrules.com, and 10 Golden Rules on all the social media, and Jay Berkowitz on all the social media. I'm lucky to get there first because there's a couple really important Jay Berkowitzes, a doctor and a university professor, but I always get to the new social media first.
Nice. Yeah, that's always that's the advantage of having a unique name and also being the first one to show up. You really got to get on your social media handles. All right, well, thank you so much for joining, coming on the podcast today. Had a great time, had a great talk and everything. And appreciate the listeners for sticking by. Any final words before we close up?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to having you on my podcast as well.
All right, yeah. I do need to get on more podcasts. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see y'all next time.